The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the First National Bank on Maple Street. Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old bank teller, was finishing her shift when she noticed something unusual. A man wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes had been sitting in the same spot near the entrance for over an hour. She mentioned it to her supervisor, but they brushed it off as nothing serious. Marcus Thompson was having the worst day of his life. 6 months ago, he lost his job at the manufacturing plant. 3 months ago, his wife left him, taking their 2 children. Last week, he received an eviction notice. The gun in his jacket pocket felt heavier with each passing minute as he sat on the bench outside the bank. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and desperation clouded his judgment. Inside the bank, the usual Friday afternoon rush was beginning. Customers lined up to cash their paychecks, deposit money, and handle their weekly banking needs. Among them was Eleanor Chen, a 78-year-old retired teacher who came to the bank every Friday to withdraw money for her weekly groceries. She noticed the troubled-looking man outside and felt a pang of sympathy, remembering her own grandson who struggled with depression. At exactly 3:47 p.m., Marcus stood up. His hands were shaking as he walked toward the bank entrance. He had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his mind, but now that it was happening, every step felt like walking through quicksand. The security guard, James Wilson, a 55-year-old veteran who was just 2 years from retirement, was checking his phone when Marcus walked past him. The automatic doors swooshed open, and the cool air conditioning hit Marcus's face. The bank smelled of coffee and floor cleaner. His heart pounded so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. Sarah was helping a customer at her window when she saw him enter. Something about his body language made her stomach drop. Marcus approached the shortest line, standing behind Eleanor Chen. The elderly woman turned and smiled at him kindly. "Hot day outside, isn't it?" she said. Marcus couldn't respond. His throat was dry, and words wouldn't come. Eleanor noticed his distress and asked, "Are you feeling all right, young man?" That simple act of kindness almost broke Marcus's resolve. He hadn't been called young man in years. His own grandmother used to call him that. But the eviction notice in his pocket and the hunger in his stomach pushed him forward. When Eleanor finished her transaction and walked away, Marcus stepped up to the window. Sarah greeted him with her professional smile. "Good afternoon, how can I help you today?" Marcus's hand moved to his pocket. This was it. The moment that would change everything. His fingers wrapped around the gun's handle. "I need..." Marcus started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I need all the money in your drawer." The words came out as barely a whisper. Sarah's smile faltered. She looked at his face, saw the desperation in his eyes, and then noticed his hand in his pocket. Training kicked in. Sarah's hands moved slowly to her drawer while her foot found the silent alarm button under her desk. "Okay," she said calmly, "I'm going to help you. Just stay calm." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she began pulling out stacks of bills. The woman at the next window noticed something was wrong. She saw Sarah's pale face and the way the man was standing. A whisper went through the bank like a wave. Customers began to realize what was happening. Some backed away slowly. Others froze in place. James Wilson, the security guard, finally looked up from his phone. His trained eyes immediately recognized the situation. His hand moved to his holster, but he didn't draw his weapon. There were too many civilians. Too much risk. He began moving slowly, using the pillars for cover, trying to get a better position. Marcus pulled the gun out halfway, just enough for Sarah to see it. "Hurry up," he said, louder this time. The sight of the weapon caused several customers to gasp. A mother pulled her child behind her. An elderly man dropped his cane, the clatter echoing through the suddenly silent bank. Eleanor Chen had been walking toward the exit when she heard the commotion. She turned and saw Marcus at the window, saw the fear on Sarah's face, and saw the gun partially visible in his pocket. Instead of running, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She started walking back toward him. Put the money in the bag, Marcus said, his voice growing more desperate. Sarah grabbed a cloth bank bag and began stuffing money into it. Her hands shook so badly that bills scattered on the counter. Marcus's eyes darted around the bank, taking in the frightened faces, the security camera blinking red in the corner, and the security guards slowly moving closer. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In his desperate planning, he had imagined it would be quick. Get the money and leave. But now, surrounded by terrified people, the weight of what he was doing crashed down on him. These weren't faceless corporations or statistics. These were real people with families, with fears, with lives he was disrupting. Eleanor reached the line again, standing just a few feet from Marcus. "Excuse me," she said softly. Marcus spun around, the gun now fully visible in his hand. Several people screamed. The security guard's hand tightened on his weapon. "Get back!" Marcus shouted, waving the gun. But Eleanor didn't move. She looked at him with the same kind eyes that had greeted him earlier. "You don't want to do this," she said. Her voice was calm, like she was talking to one of her students from her teaching days. "You don't know anything about me." Marcus's voice cracked with emotion. The gun shook in his hand. Sarah continued filling the bag, tears now streaming down her face. The bank manager, watching from his office, was on the phone with police. They would arrive in minutes. "I know you're hurting," Eleanor said, taking a small step closer. James Wilson watched in horror as this elderly woman approached an armed man. He tried to signal her to stop, but Eleanor wasn't looking at him. Her entire focus was on Marcus. "Stop." Marcus pointed the gun directly at Eleanor. The bank held its collective breath. Parents shielded their children. Some customers dropped to the floor. But Eleanor stood firm, her weathered hands clasped in front of her. "I know what desperation feels like," Eleanor continued. "I know what it's like to feel like there's no way out. But this," she gestured to the gun, "this isn't the answer. This will only make things worse." Marcus's hand began to shake more violently. The gun wavered between Eleanor and the floor. Sarah had stopped filling the bag, frozen by the scene unfolding before her. The entire bank seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "My grandson," Eleanor said, her voice gentle but clear, "he went through something similar. Lost his job, his home. He thought about doing something like this too. But he didn't. He asked for help instead. It wasn't easy, but he made it through. You can too." Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with such kindness? When was the last time someone had seen him as more than just another failure, another statistic? The gun grew heavy in his hand. "I have nowhere to go," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "I have nothing left. My kids, they won't even look at me anymore. I'm supposed to be their hero, and I can't even keep a roof over their heads." Eleanor's eyes filled with compassion. "Robbing this bank won't make you their hero. But walking away, getting help, rebuilding your life the right way, that will. Your children need their father, not a memory of who he used to be." The police sirens were audible now, growing louder with each second. Marcus heard them and panic flashed across his face. This was it. Decision time. He looked at the gun in his hand, at Eleanor's kind face, at Sarah frozen behind the window, at the bag of money on the counter. Time seemed to slow down. Marcus could see two futures stretching out before him. In one, he grabbed the money and ran, probably getting caught, definitely going to prison, losing any chance of ever being in his children's lives again. In the other, he put the gun down and faced whatever came next. The sirens grew louder. The bank doors burst open. Police officers rushed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Drop the weapon. Drop it now." The scene erupted into chaos. Customers screamed and ducked. Parents covered their children. Marcus stood at the center of it all, gun in hand, Eleanor just feet away from him, and a choice to make that would define the rest of his life. The unexpected turn that would leave all witnesses stunned was about to unfold, and no one could have predicted what happened next. The police officers formed a semicircle around Marcus, their weapons trained on him. "Drop the weapon now," the lead officer, Sergeant Patricia Rodriguez, commanded. She had been on the force for 15 years and had seen situations like this go both ways. Her finger rested on the trigger guard, ready but hoping she wouldn't need to use it. Marcus's whole body trembled. The gun in his hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Eleanor remained perfectly still, her eyes never leaving his face. She could see the war raging inside him, the battle between desperation and humanity. "Young man," Eleanor said softly, ignoring the officer's shouts for her to move away. "Look at me. Just look at me." Marcus's wild eyes found hers. In them, he saw no judgment, no fear, just understanding. "You have a choice right now. You can choose to be the man your children can look up to, or you can choose to become another sad story they'll tell. What's it going to be?" Sarah watched from behind her window, her hands still on the bag of money. She had seen many things in her 5 years as a bank teller, but nothing like this. The elderly woman's courage was extraordinary. Most people would have run, but Eleanor stood there like a lighthouse in a storm. "Ma'am, you need to move away," Officer Rodriguez called out, but Eleanor raised her hand slightly, asking for patience. She had taught high school for 40 years. She knew when someone was on the edge, and she knew that sometimes one wrong move could push them over. "I'm not going anywhere," Eleanor announced firmly. "This young man and I are having a conversation." She turned back to Marcus. "What are your children's names?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What?" he stammered, the gun lowering slightly. "Your children. You mentioned them. What are their names?" Eleanor pressed gently. "Emma and Michael," Marcus whispered. "Emma's 8. Michael's 6. As he spoke their names, his face crumbled. The tears he had been holding back finally spilled over. "Emma and Michael," Eleanor repeated. "They sound lovely. Tell me about them." The police officers exchanged glances. This wasn't standard procedure. Sergeant Rodriguez should have been demanding compliance, not allowing this conversation to continue. But something about the elderly woman's approach was working. The gun was lowering, Marcus's aggressive stance was softening. "Emma, she loves to draw," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "She makes these pictures of our family. Always draws me bigger than everyone else. Says it's because I'm the strongest." His voice broke on the last word. "And Michael, he wants to be just like me. Follows me everywhere. Or he used to." The bank had become a theater, with everyone watching this intimate drama unfold. James Wilson, the security guard, had his hand on his weapon but hadn't drawn it. He had grandchildren Emma and Michael's age. He found himself hoping this would end without violence. "They still love you," Eleanor said with conviction. "Children don't stop loving their parents because of hard times. They stop respecting them when they make choices that hurt people. Right now, you're standing at a crossroads. The choice you make in the next few moments will echo through Emma and Michael's entire lives." Marcus looked around the bank, really seeing it for the first time. He saw the terrified faces of the customers, the tears on Sarah's face, the tension in the police officers' stances. He saw mothers holding their children, protecting them from him. Is this what he had become? Someone that mothers shielded their children from? "I used to coach Michael's t-ball team," Marcus said suddenly, as if remembering a different life. "The kids called me Coach Marcus. We went to playoffs last year. Michael was so proud." The gun lowered further, now pointing at the floor. Eleanor took a small step closer. The police officers tensed, but she continued. "You can be Coach Marcus again. But not if you do this. Not if you become the man with the gun in the bank. That's not who you are. That's just who pain and desperation are trying to make you become." "But I have nothing," Marcus said, despair evident in every word. "No job, no home.
My ex-wife won't even let me see them. Says I'm unstable. Maybe she's right. Look at me.
He gestured with his free hand at himself, at the gun, at the chaos he had created.
You have something, Eleanor countered. You have a choice. You have the chance to turn this around. Yes, there will be consequences for today. But, if you put that gun down, if you walk out of here peacefully, you'll have something you won't have if you continue down this path, a future. A chance to rebuild. A possibility to one day tell Emma and Michael that when you hit rock bottom, you chose to climb back up the right way. The bag of money sat on the counter, forgotten.
Sarah watched as Marcus struggled with his decision. She found herself silently praying, something she hadn't done in years. Around the bank, others were doing the same. Even some of the police officers, beneath their professional exterior, hoped for a peaceful resolution. 5 minutes ago, I was ready to throw my life away for that money, Marcus said, looking at the bag. I thought it would solve everything. But, it wouldn't, would it? It would just create new problems. That's wisdom talking, Eleanor said, allowing herself a small smile. That's Coach Marcus talking, not the desperate man who walked in here. Which one do you want Emma and Michael to remember? Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been listening to the exchange, made a decision. She lowered her weapon slightly and spoke in a calmer tone. Sir, if you put the gun down now, we can help you. There are programs, resources. This doesn't have to end badly. Marcus looked at the sergeant, surprised by the offer of help rather than just demands for compliance. You'd help me? After this? Everyone deserves a second chance, Rodriguez said. Especially someone who's clearly in pain and asking for help. But, you have to put the gun down first. That's the first step. The bank was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of more sirens approaching. Every eye was on Marcus, waiting to see what he would decide. The moment stretched like elastic, ready to snap in either direction. Marcus thought about Emma's drawings, always showing him as the biggest, the strongest. He thought about Michael following him around, wanting to be just like Daddy. He thought about the pride in their eyes when he coached the t-ball team, when he helped with homework, when he was the father they deserved. I'm so tired, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm so tired of fighting, of failing, of disappointing everyone. Then, stop fighting alone, Eleanor said. Put the gun down and let people help you. It's not weakness to ask for help. It's strength. It's the kind of strength Emma draws in those pictures. The real kind. Marcus's hand began to shake more violently. The gun wavered, his grip loosening. He looked at Eleanor, at her kind, weathered face. She reminded him of his grandmother, who had passed away 3 years ago. She would have been ashamed to see him here, but she also would have stood by him, just like Eleanor was doing now. If I put it down, Marcus asked, his voice like a child's, what happens to me? You face consequences, Eleanor said honestly. But, you also get to start over. You get to become the man Emma and Michael need. You get to write a different story, one where their father chose courage over crime, hope over despair. The other customers in the bank watched in amazement. They had expected violence, chaos, perhaps tragedy. Instead, they were witnessing something extraordinary, human connection in its purest form, compassion in the face of danger, and the power of kindness to change hearts. Marcus closed his eyes. He saw Emma and Michael's faces. He heard their laughter. He remembered bedtime stories and Saturday morning cartoons, birthday parties and first days of school. All the moments that made life worth living. All the reasons to choose differently. When he opened his eyes, they were clear for the first time in months. The fog of desperation had lifted, replaced by something else, determination. Not to rob a bank, but to rebuild his life. Not to take shortcuts, but to take the hard road back to being the father his children deserved. Okay, Marcus said, his voice steady now. Okay. I'm going to put it down. The bank held its breath. This was the critical moment. More dangerous than the initial threat,
because a cornered person making a desperate decision could go either way. The police officers readied themselves, muscles tense, prepared for anything.
Marcus slowly bent down, his movements deliberate and careful. He placed the gun on the floor, then kicked it away from himself. It slid across the polished marble, coming to rest near a potted plant. The metallic scrape of the gun on the floor seemed to echo in the silent bank.
"Hands up!"
Sergeant Rodriguez commanded, her voice firm but not harsh.
"Slowly, hands up and step away from the weapon."
Marcus raised his hands, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face.
"Thank you," he whispered to her. "Thank you for seeing me. Not the gun, not the criminal, but me." Eleanor smiled, tears now running down her cheeks.
"You're welcome, young man.
You've made the right choice. The hard choice, but the right one."
As the police moved in to arrest Marcus, something unexpected happened. The bank, which had been frozen in fear, began to react not with anger or demands for justice, but with something else entirely. It started with one person clapping.
Then, another. Soon, the entire bank was applauding.
They weren't applauding the crime or excusing what Marcus had done. They were acknowledging the human moment they had witnessed, the triumph of compassion over violence, the power of one elderly woman's kindness to change the trajectory of a desperate man's life.
Sarah stepped out from behind her window, the bag of money forgotten on the counter.
She watched as the police handcuffed Marcus, saw the mix of relief and fear on his face. She thought about her own struggles, her own moments of desperation, and felt grateful that she had never been pushed to such extremes.
James Wilson holstered his weapon, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline.
In his 20 years of security work, he had never seen anything like this. He had been prepared for violence, trained for it, but Eleanor Chen had shown that sometimes the most powerful weapon was compassion. As the police led Marcus toward the door, he stopped and turned back to Eleanor.
"Will you?" he started, then swallowed hard. "Will you tell Emma and Michael that their dad is trying to be better? That he's going to get help?" Eleanor nodded firmly. "Give me their information, and I'll make sure they know.
I'll tell them their father made a brave choice today.
A hard choice, but a brave one."
The police allowed this final exchange, Sergeant Rodriguez making a note of the children's information. She had seen enough broken families to know that maintaining connections, maintaining hope, could make all the difference in whether someone succeeded in turning their life around. As Marcus was led out of the bank, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in for everyone present. They had witnessed something remarkable, something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. In a world that often seemed divided and harsh, they had seen proof that kindness could still triumph, that one person's compassion could change everything. The news of what happened at First National Bank spread through the community like wildfire. Within hours, everyone was talking about the elderly woman who had faced down an armed man with nothing but kindness and wisdom. But the story didn't end when Marcus was led away in handcuffs. In many ways, that was just the beginning. Eleanor Chan returned to the bank the next day, much to everyone's surprise. Sarah was back at her window, still processing the events of the previous afternoon. When she saw Eleanor walk through the doors, she immediately left her station and rushed to embrace the elderly woman. "I can't believe you came back," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "After what happened yesterday?" Eleanor patted Sarah's hand gently. "Dear, I've been coming to this bank every Friday for 15 years. I'm not about to let one bad day change that. Besides, I have some business to attend to." The bank manager, Robert Harrison, approached them. "Mrs. Chen, I want to personally thank you for what you did yesterday. Your bravery was extraordinary. But, I have to ask, weren't you terrified?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "Of course I was frightened. But, I was more frightened of what would happen if no one reached out to that young man. Fear can paralyze us, or it can push us to do what needs to be done. I chose the latter." Word had gotten out that Eleanor was at the bank, and local news crews began arriving. Everyone wanted to interview the woman who had become an overnight sensation. But Eleanor wasn't interested in fame. She had come to the bank for a specific purpose. Mr. Harrison, Eleanor said to the bank manager, I'd like to set up a fund. An account specifically for Marcus Thompson and his family. I want to start it with my own contribution. The manager was stunned. Mrs. Chen, that man tried to rob us.
He threatened you with a gun. Why would you want to help him?
Because, Eleanor replied firmly, punishment without compassion breeds more desperation.
That man didn't wake up yesterday morning planning to rob a bank. He woke up hopeless.
If we want to prevent more people from reaching that point, we need to offer hope, not just handcuffs. Sarah listened to this exchange and made a decision. I want to contribute too, she said. What he did was wrong, and it terrified me. But I saw his face when he talked about his children.
That was real pain. Real desperation. If we can help prevent another person from reaching that point, shouldn't we?
By the end of the day, word of Eleanor's fund had spread throughout the bank staff. Tellers, managers, even the security guard James Wilson, had contributed. The fund wasn't just about money, it was about showing that the community could come together to help those in crisis. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his jail cell, replaying the events over and over in his mind. His court-appointed lawyer, Jennifer Martinez, had just left after their first meeting. She had brought news that he hadn't expected. The bank isn't pressing for the maximum charges, she had told him. Several witnesses, including the woman you confronted, have written letters on your behalf. They're not excusing what you did, but they're asking for leniency, for consideration of your circumstances.
Marcus couldn't believe it.
He had expected anger, demands for justice, calls for him to be locked away. Instead, he was hearing about compassion, about second chances. It was more than he felt he deserved. 3 days later, Eleanor visited Marcus in jail. He was brought to the visiting room in shackles, his orange jumpsuit a stark reminder of his choices. When he saw Eleanor through the glass partition, he broke down completely. I'm so sorry, he said through the phone, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry for what I put you through. You should hate me. Why are you here? Eleanor smiled her gentle smile.
I'm here because I made you a promise. I told you I would check on Emma and Michael. I've spoken with their mother.
She was resistant at first. But when I told her what really happened, how you chose to put the gun down, how you chose to face the consequences rather than run, she listened.
Marcus gripped the phone tighter. My kids? You saw my kids?
I did, Eleanor confirmed. They missed their father.
Emma showed me her drawings. You're still the biggest figure in every single one.
And Michael asked when Coach Marcus was coming back to teach him how to hit the ball better. The hope in Marcus's eyes was painful to see.
Do they know?
About what I did. Their mother told them you made a mistake but that you're working to fix it.
Children are remarkably resilient, Marcus.
They have an amazing capacity for forgiveness, especially for their parents.
But you have to earn it. You have to become the man they believe you are.
Over the following weeks, the story of the First National Bank incident continued to evolve. Local organizations reached out, offering support and resources for families in crisis. The bank itself instituted new training programs for staff on how to handle desperate individuals with compassion while maintaining safety. Sergeant Patricia Rodriguez, the officer who had arrested Marcus, found herself thinking about the incident often. In her 15 years on the force, she had seen desperation drive people to terrible choices. But she had rarely seen such a dramatic turnaround, such a clear moment of human connection changing everything. She began volunteering with a program that helped recently released inmates reintegrate into society. That day at the bank, she would tell people, I learned that sometimes the badge and gun aren't the most powerful tools we have. Sometimes, it's the ability to see the human being behind the crime. Marcus's case went to court 6 weeks after the incident. The courtroom was packed, unusual for what should have been a straightforward armed robbery case. Eleanor was there, along with Sarah and several other bank employees. But what surprised everyone was the number of community members who showed up. Among them was David Park, who owned a small construction company. He had heard about Marcus's story and recognized something of his own past struggles. 20 years ago, he had been in a similar position, jobless, desperate, almost driven to crime. But someone had given him a chance, a job, a way forward. He was here to pay it forward. The judge, Honorable Maria Santos, had read all the letters, reviewed all the evidence. She had been on the bench for 20 years and had seen every type of criminal, from the hardened to the desperate. Marcus clearly fell into the latter category. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Santos began, "what you did was serious. You threatened innocent people, created fear and chaos, and could have caused tragedy. The law demands consequences for such actions." Marcus stood, his lawyer beside him. He had prepared a statement but found his voice failing him as he faced the judge. All he could manage was, "I know, Your Honor. I'm ready to face whatever punishment you deem appropriate." However, the judge continued, "I've also seen something unusual in this case. I've seen a community come together not to demand vengeance, but to offer support. I've seen victims advocate for their attacker. Most importantly, I've seen genuine remorse and a real desire to change." The courtroom was silent, everyone waiting for the sentence. Marcus's hands shook as he gripped the table. This moment would determine whether he had any chance of rebuilding his relationship with his children, of becoming Coach Marcus again. "I'm sentencing you to 5 years," Judge Santos announced, and Marcus's heart sank. "However, I'm suspending all but 6 months of that sentence, contingent upon your successful completion of probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. You will also be required to maintain employment and continue working toward reunification with your children." The courtroom erupted in whispers. It was a remarkably lenient sentence for armed robbery. But Judge Santos wasn't finished. "I want to be clear, Mr. Thompson. This is not a light sentence. This is a chance. A chance earned not by you, but by the remarkable woman who saw your humanity in your darkest moment. Don't waste it. Don't make me regret this decision. And don't make Mrs. Chen regret her faith in you." Marcus turned to look at Eleanor, who was seated in the front row. She nodded at him, that same gentle smile on her face. "Thank you," he mouthed to her. She mouthed back, "Make it count." The 6 months Marcus spent in jail were transformative. He attended every program available: anger management, job training, parenting classes. He wrote letters to Emma and Michael every week, even though he wasn't sure they were being delivered. He worked with the prison counselor to understand how he had reached such a desperate point and how to prevent it from happening again. Eleanor visited him monthly, becoming an unlikely mentor. She shared stories from her teaching days about students who had overcome incredible odds. She brought messages from Emma and Michael, and, eventually, their drawings. The first time Marcus saw a new drawing from Emma, with him still drawn as the biggest figure, he cried for an hour. Upon his release, Marcus faced the daunting task of rebuilding his life. But he wasn't alone. David Park was waiting outside the jail with a job offer. "I need reliable workers," David said simply. "Show up on time, work hard, and we'll get along fine." The first few months were difficult. Marcus lived in a halfway house, worked construction during the day, and attended counseling in the evenings. He met with his probation officer weekly, submitted to drug tests, and slowly began to rebuild trust. The reunification with his children was gradual. First, supervised visits in a neutral location. Emma was cautious at first, but Michael ran to him immediately. "Coach Marcus," the boy shouted, and Marcus had to fight back tears. Over time, the visits became longer, less supervised. Emma began to trust again, showing him her newest drawings, telling him about school. Sarah, the bank teller, kept in touch with Eleanor and followed Marcus's progress. A year after the incident, she received a letter. It was from Marcus, thanking her for her compassion during his darkest moment and apologizing again for the fear he had caused. Enclosed was a photo of him with Emma and Michael at a t-ball game. He was coaching again. The ripple effects of that day at the bank continued to spread. The fund Eleanor started grew into a non-profit organization dedicated to helping families in crisis before they reached desperate measures. The bank's new training program became a model for other financial institutions. The story was taught in criminal justice classes as an example of restorative justice. 3 years later, Marcus stood before a group of at-risk youth at a community center. He had been invited to share his story, to hopefully prevent others from making similar choices. Eleanor sat in the front row, her hair a little grayer but her smile just as warm. "I once held a gun in a bank," Marcus began, his voice steady. "I was ready to throw my life away for money that wouldn't have solved any of my real problems. But an elderly woman saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She saw a father, not a criminal. A man in pain, not a monster. Her kindness saved my life." He looked out at the young faces, some skeptical, some interested. "I'm not here to tell you that everything will be easy if you just make good choices. Life is hard. Sometimes it feels impossible. But I am here to tell you that there are people who will help if you ask. There are second chances if you're willing to work for them. And there is always hope, even in your darkest moment." After his talk, a young man approached him. "My dad's in jail," the teenager said. "Everyone says he's no good, that I'll end up just like him. But you changed, right? Maybe he can too?" Marcus put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "People can change," he said firmly. "I'm living proof. Your dad will have to want it, work for it, fight for it. But, yes, people can change. Don't give up on him. But, more importantly, don't give up on yourself." Eleanor watched this exchange with satisfaction. The terrified, desperate man who had walked into the bank that day was gone, replaced by someone who had learned from his mistakes and was now helping others avoid them. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the old desperation tried to creep back in. But Marcus had persevered, supported by a community that chose restoration over retribution. 5 years after the bank incident, Marcus received a letter that made him cry. It was from the court, informing him that his probation had been successfully completed. He was truly free. That same week, Emma, now 13, won an art contest with a drawing titled My Hero. It showed a man in a hard hat teaching children how to play baseball. The figure was drawn bigger than everyone else, not because he was perfect, but because in her eyes, he had grown into the father she always knew he could be. The First National Bank still operates on Maple Street. Sarah still works there, now as a senior teller. James Wilson retired but comes in every Friday to do his banking. And Eleanor Chen, now in her 80s, still makes her weekly visits. A small plaque by the entrance commemorates the day when compassion triumphed over violence, when one woman's kindness changed the trajectory of multiple lives. The plaque reads, "In this place, on an ordinary Friday afternoon, an extraordinary act of human compassion prevented tragedy and proved that even in our darkest moments, the light of human kindness can show us the way forward." Visitors often ask about the plaque, and the staff are always happy to tell the story. Not as a tale of crime and punishment, but as a reminder that every person we meet might be fighting battles we know nothing about. That sometimes, the most powerful weapon against desperation is not force, but understanding. That one person's choice to see humanity in another can create ripples that transform entire communities. Marcus now works as a foreman for David Park's construction company. He coaches both Emma and Michael's sports teams. He volunteers with at-risk youth and speaks at schools about making positive choices. His relationship with his ex-wife has improved to the point of successful co-parenting. He has become, in every sense, the man Eleanor saw in him that day. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is how ordinary it has become. In a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding, the community that formed around Marcus and Eleanor proved that there is another way. That justice doesn't always mean punishment. That sometimes, the most stunning plot twist isn't in the dramatic moment of confrontation, but in the quiet, persistent work of rebuilding and redemption. The unexpected turn that left all witnesses stunned wasn't just that Eleanor faced down an armed man with kindness. It was that her kindness created a chain reaction that transformed a moment of potential tragedy into a story of hope, proving that even in our most desperate hours, the human capacity for compassion can change everything. The gun that could have destroyed lives became the catalyst for saving them. And, in the end, everyone involved discovered that the most powerful force in that bank wasn't the weapon or the money or even the fear, it was the simple, extraordinary power of one person choosing to see another's humanity and refusing to look away.